Hi guys, Steve Elliott here. Today I'm going to paint this picture of an owl, and I'm going to paint it in Artrage using the tubes of paint and the palette knives, and I'm going to show you step by step how I did this so you can follow along. So let's get into it. So I'm straight into Artrage, and you will see I have a canvas size of 4096 by 2896 pixels, and that is really important. I find that if I work within that size, the brushes they're nice and sharp. The detail in the brush strokes, and I mean the shadows and the contours and the thickness of the paint, it's nice and sharp. If you make your canvas too big, those pixels become blurry and your picture becomes fuzzy. So I like to work at that size. And as I said, this painting I'm going to do mostly with tubes of paint, and I'm going to show you how I use tubes of paint and how I use the palette knife to smear that paint about. But I begin by just getting some local colour on this canvas using a roller, and I just selected a blue. I'm not using a palette. I'm making the colours up as I go along, or selecting the colours as I go along. And as you can see, I've got a photo of an owl, and it's okay, you know, it's a nice picture of an owl, but it's not very dynamic. So usually I put the reference on a different screen, but today I thought it would be, well, I say a different screen. I split the screen on the iPad and put the image to one side, but today I wanted to use the actual photo reference tool to put the image on the screen, and you'll see why in a minute. I'll explain why as we go along. But I start off just getting some local colour on the canvas, and I intend to paint in the background first. So before I start using the tubes of paint, I begin by sketching in, and I'm just using a regular flat brush. It's not thick paint or anything, just to get in that tree that is behind the owl. And you can see straight away I've changed the palette. I'm not going for the exact colours of the photograph. I'm mixing them up a bit because I want it to be a sort of a blue colour, and I've added a bit of blue grey into there. Whether that stays, I don't know. I might have to get rid of that in a bit, but that was just to sort of highlight the edge of the tree at this point. So, and I start using the palette knife because I know that I am going to use the palette knife for this. At this point, I don't know what brush I'm going to use though. So I know I'm going to use a palette knife, but I'm not sure if I'm going to use thick paint or what. So I'm still messing around. I'm just using the regular flat brush, getting on colours, and generally sort of smearing paint on the canvas, because I want to use the palette knife, but the roller puts very small amount of paint on the canvas. So I need more colour on there to use the palette knife to smear it around. The palette knives just don't barely touch any of the paint that's used with the roller. So I'm sort of painting that tree in, and I'm selecting colours at the minute, still off the colour wheel, just sort of adjusting it slightly, tweaking it, and putting leaves in. And what I'm trying to achieve here is an out of focus blurred tree and background similar to the photograph, almost as if I've really dropped the aperture down on my camera to 2.8 or something and got this narrow depth of field and real blurry background, and then the owl can be in pin sharp focus. So I'm just scrubbing paint on, and I'm just using that flat brush, nothing special, scrubbing paint on and going for it quite wild, Absolutely loving getting this on. You won't see any leaves in this, you know, painted leaves. It's almost abstract. And I'm using the palette knife now, and I'm using, I think, the Odd Wet Blender just to smear this out. There's lots of different knives you can use, and I suggest that you try them all. I messed around with these quite a bit. You'll see there's no presets loaded there. It is a problem with Artrage, and every time I want to use the presets, I have to reinstall them. It's not a big deal. It's just clicking like one button and then it reinstalls them. But it is a bit of a faff. The first time it took me quite a while to work out how to do it. But it can be annoying. So I added a little bit of paint into the mix of the palette knife there. And it does give it this nice sort of soft edge, but it's not really what I'm looking for. And it's still at this point, I'm still not come up with the idea of using the tubes of paint. And it is a, you know, a lot of people would probably use the tubes of paint and squirt them out and never use them once and think, oh, what can I do with this? But in conjunction with the palette knives, they are, it really is an awesome way of getting your paint on there. So I'm still messing with these knives. I'm not 100% happy yet with what I'm doing or what effect I'm getting. So there we go. I've just installed the presets. It's just a you click on the cog icon, and once you've clicked on the cog icon, you can, I think there's an option that just says reinstall presets, and you click on that and then they reappear like magic. And I've chose the Odd Out Smudge. That is my favorite palette knife when I'm using oil paint. If I was doing watercolors, I love the Artrage Chaos palette knife. So I really do recommend you mess around with these, because the ones I'm using might not work for you. You might want to try something else. And I don't change the settings much with them. Sometimes I add a little bit of paint onto the knife, but see, I've gone back to the Odd Wet Blender again now. And I'm still sort of wondering how I'm going to get this effect that I'm after. It's sort of getting there, but it's not 100% there. And I think it's the trouble I'm having. I really want the knife to make a real pronounced mark on the canvas, and I'm not getting it with the paint. So here we go. Now I've thought, why not use the tubes? Let's try the tubes of paint. Let's see what we've got with them. So I'm using two colours. I've got that green on there. I thought it'd be a good time to save the paint in there. I've got the light green and the dark green, and I'm sort of mixing them on and letting the paint overlap one another. Just sort of putting colour where I think I'm going to want it once I've blended it out. So at this point it looks really weird because I've got these real blobby bits of paint daubed onto there. So I've got that palette knife again, and now I start smearing it out. And when I zoom in, you can see straight away the difference it's made. I'm using that Odd Wet Blender, and it's not the effect I want. I want that Artrage Chaos. Watch this. Not the Artrage Chaos. Sorry, the Odd Out Smudge. Look at that. And you can see the knife cutting into the paint and spreading it like butter. And that is the effect I'm after. That's what I've been had in my head that I wanted all the way along. I just love the way this smears out. And I zoom out and I'm thinking, that is so cool. It's perfect. And you notice I've not even thought about the owl yet, because I'm not I'm having so much fun with the oil paint and the tubes of paint and the palette knife working on this tree. I've not even thought about the owl, and I'm not in any rush to get into it. I mean, the old painting only took just over an hour, so it works for me from the point of view that I've got absolutely zero patience and I want everything finished straight away. But if it had taken me 3 or 4 hours, I don't think I would have bothered, because it was just like, I was like a kid with tubes of paint that I could smear on the walls and sort of drag my fingers through, and it was just fun. So I'm liking what I'm doing with the sort of top right corner or quarter of the painting, but obviously I've got to sort of balance this out over the whole of the canvas. It's all right just sort of painting it up there. So I'm going to do the I'm going to do the trunk now, but once I've done the trunk, I'll start on the bottom left corner as well to sort of balance up against what I've got on the right. You notice I've picked a nice dark colour. I really want there to be some contrast in this. Got that palette knife again, just smearing it out. This is my favourite type of painting, to be honest. I just love working like this, and I should do more of it. I'd like to know in the comments what you think about the idea of using a palette knife, if you're going to give it a go, or if you prefer using brushes. I don't know if you've ever tried anything like this before. I remember I've got a twin brother, and we was at school. We're both good at painting and drawing at school. It was our favourite subject, and funnily enough, we were the only 2 kids in our class at school that actually chose it as an option when we did CSEs certificates, and we were the only 2 kids in our class, so we had to go and sit with students that were a year older than us, and it was quite scary, really. But anyway, I've always loved painting, and my brother's the same, and we both like experimenting. And we got a really good, the first year was at this school, we'd be about 11, 12 years old, probably 12. And we had a really good art teacher, but he only stayed 1 year, then he left. And then after that, we didn't really get a decent art teacher. But while he was there, my brother did a painting like this, and he'd done one painting, and in the last half an hour of the class, he got a sheet of paper, and he got tubes of paint like this, and he squirted them over the canvas, and started to produce his painting. And I thought he did quite a good. I was quite envious, actually, because he'd come up with something new that I hadn't seen before, where he'd use his palette knife and paints just like this. And the teacher went berserk at him and shouted at him for wasting resources because we hadn't got an infinite amount of paint to use, and he was being selfish and greedy and stopping other kids being able to do painting, and really deflated me brother. And then later on in the day, the art teacher went to see my brother and apologised to him. He said, "I'm really sorry. You was right. I shouldn't be trying to stifle your creativity." So he was a brilliant teacher, and I'll never forget that story. But so that's where that was my introduction to squirting paint onto a canvas and smearing it out with a knife. Anyway, back to this painting. So you can see now I have actually started applying paint to the bottom right of the corner and trying to create a balance, really. And there's no leaves in there or anything. I've just sort of crashed some colour on, got that palette knife and smeared it all out. And I'm quite happy with how the whole thing is going at this point. And the only thing that's bugging me, I think, is that white behind the tree. I'm not sure if I know I don't like it. I'm still working on the bottom left. There we go. I'm choosing some more paint and crashing in a few branches, and I'm going to use the knife obviously straight away. I changed the size of the knife, made it a little bit smaller just to smudge that out, but not with really huge lines. Or when I say huge lines, I mean a thick palette knife trawled through that line, because it would just destroy it and it would disappear. So I wanted that to be a little bit softer. Back in with the paint again, bit more green going in there, still sort of just squirting in some paint. You'll notice too that the pressure of the stylus on the screen of the iPad determines how thick the tube of paint is that's squirted out. So if you only put a little bit of pressure on, that tube of paint is much less. There we go. You'll notice I've kept the photo horizontal throughout of this, and that was so that I could determine the position of the tree, the angle of the tree, and get all of that in the right place. That white's going now. Look, you can see I've painted. I began by painting a little bit in with the brush, and then using the tubes of paint, squirted some of that on and smeared that out. I left a little bit of the white, but I just felt that it wasn't adding anything to the painting. So now you can see I've pretty much got that background finished. I'm really happy with that, and I've saved it. I think I'm going to create a new layer. Here we go, into layers, a new layer, because when I do the owl, I don't want to damage that background. So the initial painting I want on a new layer, and you'll notice straight away there I changed the angle of the reference image, and that's really important, because what I'm trying to do is get the angle of the photo so the owl on it is in the same angle I want to paint it on my canvas. Because if I'd left it horizontally and tried to paint the owl at a jaunty angle, I'd have had the additional problem of not only trying to draw the owl accurately, but mentally transfer all of the angles of the wings and everything, as well as drawing the owl. So I could have adjusted the angle of the canvas, I suppose, but I didn't. It was much easier to just tilt the angle of that photograph, and that is why I'm using the reference photo function in Artrage for this one. Usually, as I said earlier, I split the screen on the iPad and put the picture to the left, but on this one I wanted to use the reference picture in the app for this reason, so I could just really easily just tilt it at an angle to get that shape in. And I'm I just selected a nice cream colour, and I'm painting a silhouette of the owl. Really, I'm not looking at any detail. I'm just trying to make sure I get the wings in the right place, the body, all the proportions are right. Initially, the left wing of the owl, or the right wing as you look at it, I make it way too big compared to the one on the left. And you'll see that in a second. There we go. You see how long it is. Didn't take me long to work that out. You see, the thing is there, I'm looking at that now and it's so glaringly obvious. But when I was painting it, I wasn't looking at the wing on the left of the painting. I was just looking at the one I was concentrating on painting. So you really need to be concentrating on the whole of the image all of the time, cross-referencing what you're doing. I mean, I spotted that pretty quick, and then I choose the eraser to start chiseling away and making that a more appropriate size. So that's why I put this on a separate canvas, because if I hadn't done that, I would have either had to keep using the back key to keep undoing, or the undo function to keep undoing the painting till I got back to a point where I could repaint it again. But by doing this on a separate layer, it was easier to get the eraser out and just adjust it slightly and take some of the colour away. Because this is just a guideline that I've painted in here, really. It's just I've got it on one layer, but as soon as I'm happy with it, I am going to flatten it onto the main painting. So here I'm thinking I just haven't got the body of the owl quite big enough. That just needs tweaking a little bit. Just by doing this all before I start putting the detail in, it's going to make it a lot easier for me further down the line. I'm not using any tubes of paint here. I'm just using the flat brush, or it might be the round brush actually. There we go. Just doing the tips of the wings a little bit. But see how I've got it dead center pretty much. Not feeling that. That's not quite how I want it. So I go into the layer, I click on the cog and choose transform. And by choosing transform, it means I can reposition that, not quite at that angle, but change the angle as well and bring the body of the bird lower down into the lower third of that canvas, giving me a much more pleasing composition. I feel it's much more dramatic. But then obviously now I need to change the angle of my reference photo as well to match what I've painted. There we go. And that's going to make it a lot easier now to start getting the detail in. So I'm happy with where it is now, so I can go ahead and flatten that image down. And the reason I do that is I do not want the owl to look like it's painted on top of the sky. I want it to blend in with the sky and look like it's been painted into it. So I'm back in with my tubes of paint, squirting that paint on. Absolutely loving that. Looking at the photograph, referencing it all the while now, just sort of changing the colours. And I'm picking these all off the colour wheel at this point, just to get the colour started. And I'm squeezing painting. I've now got the palette knife, and I'm going to start just blending them together a little bit. Just softening them off. All done with the odd out smudge. I don't think I changed from that. Once I'd found the one that I liked, I stuck with it all the way through. This was so cool. It was just so easy to get the texture of the feathers just by scraping the knife into it. So I'm still using the knife there. I should have zoomed in a little bit, I think. There we go, back to the tubes of paint. And pretty much all of this is going to be done with tubes of paint now. I want this real thick texture on the wings of the owl and the body and the face. You can see I'm sort of painting in the I don't know what you call it, the quill of the feathers almost there. And then I'm going to use that palette knife to smudge them all out. Yeah, loving it. Continually looking at the photo and trying to make sure I've got a reasonable colour rendition going off there. Loving that. Now putting in a bit of dark colour because there's a little bit of sort of shadow under the wing there. I want to get that in. Again, painting in, I suppose, like the quills of the feathers. And also, you might notice I sort of scrape the knife into the tips of the feathers or the ends of the feathers into the sky, so it's starting to blur in and become part of that that part of the same painting, as opposed to be sat on the top of it and painted separate. Putting a few highlights in there. This was so much fun. I painted on a Sunday afternoon, sat on Sunday morning actually. No, it was the afternoon, just early afternoon. Sat on the settee. Took about an hour to do. Really chilled out. It was cold outside. We've got the fire on. And it was a real fun painting. I really enjoyed it. I didn't feel like I was rushing it or there's any need to rush through it. I was just loving this process of getting the paint on there. Notice I've picked up a little bit of blue into the wing. Now there's no blue at all on the photo, but I wanted to just put a little bit into that wing just to kind of tie the owl in to the painting, really. That was the idea of that. Working a little bit more detail on there. Back to the tubes. So I'm continually swapping between the tubes of paint and the palette knife. I have done paintings before where I've literally covered the whole of the canvas with the tubes of paint and sort of put stripes of paint down there and then put in all of the detail and then taken the knife and smeared it all out. Once I've got the whole thing covered. This one I'm obviously doing a very different way, where I'm sort of working on smaller areas of the canvas and working on bits at a time. I kind of hoping that I zoom in on the owl. I can't believe on the face. I can't believe I painted the whole face zoomed out like that, so tiny. I mean, I've got the sort of larger iPad, but that would still be really small to work on. Just taking that shadow up into the right wing as you look at it, left wing of the owl. So I'd zoom in small just so that I can get an idea how the whole thing is looking. It's sort of a fresh perspective or way of looking at it, just to make sure everything is as I want it to be. Now I'm getting in the light side of the face, squirting plenty of paint on there. Then just taking that knife, smearing it out again. It seems to be a pretty much simple process of doing that. There we go. Looking at the reference photo all the time, thinking, okay, that shadow goes across the top of the head and cuts across the wing. So I need to beef up the shadow on the shadow side of the face of the owl as well. That's going to need to be sorted. So I'm still following all the same principles as I would if I was doing it with a brush. I'm very much into lights and darks and looking at shadows and where they appear. Yeah, that's looking quite nice now. So that, I think, changing the angle of the owl has made a huge difference to the painting. If I kept it horizontal, straight on, it would not have looked as dramatic as this. So I'm back in with the second wing. I am going to whiz it forward a little bit now, because the painting of the second wing is going to look pretty much the same as the first. So here we go. Fast forward. So just putting the finishing touches to the shadow work on the wings now, and then I am going to be going into the face, just catching the shadow underneath the owl. So it's making the face, it's sort of silhouetting the face or outlining the face, and I needed that darker shadow, as I said earlier, in the shadow side of the face. So I'm getting that in now. A nice blue, grey blue. And I'm using the, I think I'm using the thick oil brush at this point. Yeah, I've gone to the brushes and I'm using the thick oil paint. Painting them, the eyes. Now the secret of the eyes, I think, is the shadows that are painted around the eyes. As more than the actual eyes themselves. That's what will make them look as though they're sitting in the face, as opposed to two little blue circles painted on top of a face. So I felt I needed the thick oil brush here to get in the detail work. It just wasn't cutting it with the palette knife. So pretty much this is the only bit I do with the brush, really. Sort of totally destroying the eye while I'm working on the shadows, but you know, that's okay, that's cool, doesn't matter. It won't take a second to paint them back in again. And by using the thick paint, it means that I will be able to take the palette knife and smear that colour out again. Whereas if I was using a regular brush, you just wouldn't be able to push the paint around quite so much. This all came together really quick. I was well pleased with the effect I was getting. It didn't take me a lot of effort or sort of changing things and tweaking it. I got it in pretty much straight away. I was really pleased with how it went. It's just that the left eye of the owl, right eye as you're looking at it, is still just sitting on top of the face. That wants, it's crying out for the shadow. Just putting that kind of crown on top of the owl there. I'm waiting for this this shadow to go in over the eye. I can't believe I left it so long. There we go. That's it. That's what I've been waiting for. And that to me just sort of sets it all off really nice. So, you know, in isolation, the face is almost abstract and there's not a lot of detail work gone into that at all. But for me, it's enough. This picture, by the way, I don't think I've already said it. I got it off Pixabay, the library of source images that are copyright free. And what I mean by copyright free, not only do you not have to pay for the image, you don't have to pay to license it or anything, so you can use it freely. Great source. So I will put a link every time I use a Pixabay picture. I put a link in the description below, so you can find that if you want to have a look at it, want to have a go at this yourself. So that's looking like almost like a completed picture. Just sort of tweaking little bits of it now. I thought at this stage I'd nearly finished, and I'm going to put I'm sure I'm going to sign it any minute now. I think I'll probably do a little bit more on the tail. I think that needs a bit more work in. That's not quite finished. And the legs, so it isn't properly finished yet. I've got a little bit more to do, I see. I'm just wondering what I'm going to do next. I think I'm sort of fine-tuning something around the face. Yeah, it's the bottom of the face. Just getting that shadow in there and blending it out. Just to add a little bit of form. But it does need that. It does need that tail feather putting in. I'm pretty sure I'm going to be doing that now. Yeah, there we go. So back to the tubes of paint again. Definitely needed that. Same technique as before. Just brushing that in. But you've got to stick with this video. If you're thinking, oh, it's getting near the end, stick with it, because there are two radical changes, two things that I do that totally change what this painting is. And if you don't stay till the end, you're totally going to miss it. And that would be a shame, especially if you've hung in this close. You know, I'm not bothered with detail. I'm just sort of getting that palette knife and scraping it into those legs so they're almost out of focus. Sort of motion blur and atmospheric blur. I can't believe I'm still fiddling with it. I thought at this point this looks to me pretty much done. There's a bit of the feather on the tail on the opposite side to the one I've just painted that needs a tiny little bit of going in there. Maybe that's what I need to be doing. Yeah, there we are. Just pop that in. Definite technique of squirt, smear, squirt, smear, squirt and smear. And don't forget, all of this has been painted on one layer. Once I'd got that owl, the outline of the owl, and merged that layer down, this has still all gone in on one layer. Still looking at the shadows, look, still just making final adjustments. When do you stop? This is the thing. It's you could go on forever. But at some point you've got to make a decision. There we go. I think that's ready for a signature. So we create a new layer and pop my signature on there. And then I'm thinking, you know what? I want to do something radical. And let's get some. Maybe I didn't put the signature in there, but I wanted, at this point, I thought it's all looking a bit kind of tame. I want something that's a bit more abstract and a bit more movement into it. So I just get them tubes and squirt loads of paint into it. So this is radical move number 1 that we're talking about here. And I'm just sort of selecting the colours off of the canvas by holding the stylus onto the screen, selecting the colour and putting it on. And then I'm using the palette knife now just to smear those colours out. And I'm sort of kind of really liking what's going off here. I'm thinking, yeah, this is what I want. But I have to say, I wanted this on a separate layer because I was really worried that I was going to totally make a mess of it. But I'm not so sure as if I did put it on a separate layer. I thought I was pretty convinced I did. But I would recommend, if you have a go at this and you get to this point, make a new layer for these extra blurred wings. So I guess it would be like having a really slow shutter speed. It'd be a really bright day and a slow shutter speed to capture the movement in the wings. That was kind of what I was going for there. And I wanted I kind of destroyed the tree a little bit, and I wanted to keep that little bits of the tree silhouetting the blurredness of those additional wings. So I'm kind of really liking what's going in there. And again, it was just like loads of thick paint put in. I'm just squirting that paint on. I would have used tubes and tubes of paint on this if this was a real painting. And then get that palette knife and blend it out again. So this was fun because it was kind of totally out of the imagination, something that I thought would look quite cool and add a dynamic to the painting that I felt was just totally missing. And it needed that. It needed something to stop it being like a painting of a photograph. I know I'd already sort of put it on an angle, but I wanted something else to really make it not be a photograph but be a painting. So this is what I come up with. I kind of got carried away sort of squirting that painting, and I felt I wanted a little bit of sky in there. All done with a knife and tubes. I'm not using any brushes here. I sampled the colour there off of the tree because I wanted to, I felt I'd painted over too much of the tree, and I wanted to put a little bit of that through the blurriness of the wings that is sort of a blurred motion, really. That's what that's all about. So this is all guesswork. I'm not, you can imagine I'm not looking at the photo at all now. This is totally out of my imagination, as it were. Putting a little bit of that tree back that I kind of lost. with a lighter green. So this is all sort of over painting what I've already done and adding more thick paint. This if this was a real painting, the paint on the top of the painting would dry and skin over, and then the paint underneath would stay wet, and it would eventually start to crinkle. The paint on the top would crinkle, and then it would crack. And you see this in stress painting effects that people do all the time on furniture. But that's what would happen to this painting if it was a real painting. I'm sure it would. It would. You get what's called a crocodiling effect. That's what we used to call it when I was a painter and decorator. The nice thing about using the palette knife is when you put the paint on it, you don't have to be that smooth, and then you can just use that knife to smooth it out. I love that effect. So we're getting quite a dynamic looking painting. So there's 3 stages of this painting, and I'd like your opinion on which one you prefer. So the first one is obviously just the owl painted on the canvas on the against the blue sky. Do you like that? Or do you prefer this version with the sort of blurred out slow motion wing things happening? Or will you prefer what I'm going to do next? Because this painting definitely evolved. It was not it wasn't something that I had in my head when I started. I didn't have the idea of the blurred. So those, did you see those blurred wings are on a separate layer, and I've just switched them off, look, so you can see the bird. Which one of those two do you prefer? Do you like the bird on the sky or with the blurred wings? Anyway, I was saying it kind of evolved. I had no idea I was going to do that with the wings, and I have no idea that I'm going to do what I choose to do next. So I'm just sort of moving the picture out of the way so you can have a look at that. And I reckon I am going to merge that down. I've created a new layer. This is where I sign it, I'm pretty sure, as a finished painting. Changing the size of my brush. Sometimes when you choose the size of the brush, it pops up a keyboard, and I don't like typing in the figure, so I always close it down and use the slider to sign it. And then I felt like I wanted to sign it not just across the bottom of the canvas, but up the side of the tree. Anyway, now I've got to this point, I've got a finished painting, but I'm thinking, you know what? Whoever's taken this photo has probably been at a village show or something, or a village fair, where there's been a guy there with birds of prey, and he's had them flying in the daytime. And owls don't particularly fly around much in the daytime. They usually fly at night. So I thought, let's do it. Let's go for it. Let's get a night sky on this painting. So I took a deep breath and chose a dark blue and started just squirting loads of paint on this canvas. And I'm thinking that is not going to cut it. It's just not dark enough at this point. So I'm getting quite a few different colours in there. all done with the tube at this point. Now I'm going to get a knife and start smearing it out. I've taken the size of that blade right up to 100% and then start pushing that paint around. So straight away it's made the tree pop out. That's sort of push forward, and it's definitely going to do the same with the owl. The only thing is I'm thinking that I needed to go darker with the colour. So I've been a little bit careful around the edge of the owl. I'm not sort of going right up to the edge yet. And I felt I needed to do this on the same, I'm pretty sure I'm on the same layer. I've not created a new layer for this. Obviously need to zoom in to get right tied up. You see there, I totally lose that tail feather, which is a shame because I don't think I painted that back in. Pushing the colour into the wings as well, look, that's quite important. So it's a start, isn't it? But that could just be, it could still be daytime, and that could be just some bushes and things behind the owl, and that's not what I want. This is what I want, some really darks to make this a night sky. So now I'm feeling it. I'm thinking, yeah, this is where we need to go. So quite a radical move to make in a finished painting. I have to say I duplicated the file. So I'm working on a copy of the original file that I'd considered to be finished. So I've got nothing to lose here. If I totally mess it up, it doesn't matter because I've still got the original, so I can safely work on the same layer, so I can smudge the blue into that dark blue, the light blue into the dark blue, without worrying about it. And I just so much like that. But I think it just, not only is it more correct that an owl would be flying at night, it makes the owl pop and really pushes it forward because of the contrast in that dark colour to the light colour. So what has gone from a photo of an owl flying during the daytime, just horizontal shot, and I've got this owl at a jaunty angle with loads of sort of slow motion blur on the wings, painted at night. So I've kind of radically changed what was the initial photo, and I've done it in stages. It's not something that I'd planned from the off. I came up with the ideas as I was going. Sort of, first of all, I came up with the blurred wings, and then I came up with this night sky. And I know at this point, even though I've only got a little bit of that blue in there, that this is totally going to work. So I am going to blast forward again to get all of this blue in. Here we go. Pretty much most of the sky, but then I thought, wouldn't it be cool if he was hunting by moonlight? So I thought, let's crack a moon in there, and I'm using a colour similar to the colours in the owl itself, and I start painting in a moon, and I want the sort of clouds cutting across the moon, a bit like in the style of Joseph Wright. So I'm just sort of roughing in this moon shape with the tubes of paint, and then I'm sculpting in the or squirting some paint on there for the clouds, and then I'm using the knife to do a little bit of sculpting and give the impression of these clouds that are rolling in front of the moon. And then I looked at it and thought, yeah, it's all right. It's not quite it doesn't look like a moon yet. It still needs a bit more work. So I'm just fiddling around with this quite a bit, zooming in and out, just give me the idea, is it looking okay or what? It's getting there. Sampled the colour, that dark colour again. Well, actually it's a light colour. For more clouds, use that knife just to push that colour around. This did feel quite three-dimensional, really, sort of thinking of the shapes of the clouds and using the knives to push this paint around all the time. So I'm getting the clouds in, but I'm sort of losing the moon a little bit now. So I now need to go back in and just to slightly redefine that a little bit if I can. I don't know if anybody would actually think this was a moon at the end of the day or not. I don't know if I should have worked on it a little bit more, but I think it's quite reasonable, I suppose. It is pretty much an abstract painting. Well, it's not abstract, but it's definitely not lifelike. So I'm just sort of pushing this colour around while I'm thinking what I'm going to do with it, really. And then I felt that it needed some darks. I just felt that whole area was a little bit light, and that moon needed to be defined a little bit more. And by putting the darks in, that's enabled me to do that. Yeah, I'm quite liking what's happening there now. That's definitely round, like a moon. So I'm going in with some dark clouds. Yeah, that's looking pretty good. I'm happy with how that's going. God knows how many tubes of paint I would have used if this was with real paint. I don't think I could afford to buy that many tubes. There we go. I'm looking at that now. I'm thinking, that's pretty good. That's close. I like the way that the tree sort of disappears into the ground. It doesn't sort of stay defined all the way down. I've sort of blurred it off at the bottom. That's nice. All of things like that add to the composition instead of cutting the painting in half, as it were. So zooming out again, having another look, thinking, am I okay with it? Does it all look all right? A lot of people do the thing where they flip the canvas over. I tend not to do that, probably because I've never really bothered to find the hotkey that allows me to do it. But I like to just zoom out and look at a thumbnail of what I'm drawing. Maybe I should try the other technique where I flip the canvas over because I'd see more detail perhaps. I just wanted some highlights on those clouds. Just on the tops of them where the moon would be. Putting a little bit of light around there. By the light of the silvery moon type scenario. But I want them really kind of thin. So I think I'm sure I'm going to push the colour back into them to sort of make them not quite so thick. I wanted a really light rim light round there. So I choose the brush at this point too, and I'm going to paint in a few very thin highlights for the tops of the clouds, and that's the kind of thickness that I'm really wanting. There we are, that's it. Just by scraping into it, you get this nice effect that you can see that the paint's been pushed away almost with the handle of a brush. There we go. And just sort of get some blue in there. I'm not so sure if blue is the right colour, that blue. But it certainly makes the tops of that white light a lot thinner, which is really what I was after. And I've got a, looks like the palette knife's at about 40%. There we go. That's it. That's looking more like it. So I've pretty much, I painted the moon in, and I'm pretty much obscuring the whole thing now, making it disappear. There, I'm liking that. I'm just thinking maybe I should have left the top of that moon lighter instead of the dark or the sort of mauve colour that's the bottom of the cloud. I think it probably would have been better to have left that a little bit lighter perhaps. I might go back into the painting and just tweak that a little bit. I've got to go back into it and tweak the tail feather that I painted out as well. So there we go. That's another addition that's not in the original photo that I just came up as an afterthought that I thought would look quite cool. Oh, that's looking better. Yeah, that bit of dark sort of yeah, makes that cloud sort of cover the moon a little bit better. Yeah, so this is getting very, very close to being finished now. Just sort of checking it as a thumbnail again, making sure I like it. Let's zoom in. Have a good look at it. Save the painting. That's always quite important, isn't it? And there we go. That is it. That is my painting of an owl by moonlight using the palette knife and tubes of paint in Artrage on the iPad. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, a big thumbs up as always is much appreciated. If you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing because I have lots of videos like this and I would love to be sharing them with you. So hopefully I will see you all in the next one. Bye.